What's up, guys? Let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called Bus Ascii-Art Animation, and it starts with some examples of Ascii-Art, which is making images out of text characters. And then it says the one we're going to do is a bus. And the bus moves forward one notch at a time until it hits the edge of the frame, and it goes off screen, so we only see part of it. And what makes this problem interesting is that everything is parameterized. We don't know how big is the bus, how fast is it moving, how long is it moving, or how much space does it have. So here's an example of a big one with the bigger area. It still eventually gets cut off. And that's what we want our code to be in general, is parameterized. We want it to be able to handle different kinds of situations instead of just being nailed down to only one thing. So I'm going to start this by doing that thing they do on cooking shows sometimes, where they're like, here's one I made earlier, and they get it out of the oven and it's already ready. You don't have to watch them preheat it. So I'm going to copy something I typed earlier, which is the lines of text making the bus. The bus has a roof, and then some body sections, and then the wheels. And in the middle, there's the extendable part, because if they give us the minimum size, we get a little guy, and extra sizes after that will give you middle sections, like a table. You ever see a dining room table that has a little, I think they call it a leaf in the middle that makes it accommodate more guests. Now, I did them as separate lines. You can do a multi-line string with triple quotes, but I think we would end up splitting it anyway, and I just thought this was easier. So we'll see how it goes. One more thing we need in the text realm before we get into the action is we actually want these little dotted lines between them in the final result. They want it to be like a film strip, or like red tickets at a carnival. They want them to have these little dotted lines in between. So let's do that and get that ready. I'm going to call it real. It feels like a reel to me. That's a word. I don't know if it makes any sense. And the reel is going to be, first of all, a blank line, and then some dotted lines. So it's going to be, first a new line, and then space times frame size, because if it's a long frame, we have to make a bunch of spaces. And then another line, and then dash times frame size. And then I think one more. So let's print that just to see if we're on the right track. If we print real, we go, yeah, that's a bunch of dotted lines, and they are different lengths depending on situation. And now at the end of this thing, I'm going to use that. Like the very last line of this is going to be return real dot join, because it's going to be reals in between. And then the bus, right? We don't have the bus yet, but we're going to make that at the current frame for frame in range frame count. So this is our last line. Obviously there's stuff in between here, but at the end we're going to take a bunch of buses, which are made out of these, and connect them with the reals, which are the dotted line thing. So in between we have to use these other parameters to figure out how big is the bus, or we got that, but where's it going, and is it shifted left to right, and things like that. So let's do those. I'm going to make a couple little baby functions with a lambda. Remember, lambda doesn't matter to Python. They treat it exactly the same as a classic def style function. It's just visually different, and I like the lambdas because when it's really short, it allows you to do it with no lines, no indenting, that kind of thing. So if you don't like it, that's fine. I'm going to make one that's called, well, let's just do the backwards. Let's do it like the bus first, And so the bus is a function that it needs to know the frame. It needs to know what frame we're on, because the bus is in a different spot every frame. And it might be smaller if we're cutting off half of it, that it's hit the edge, So what do we need to know? Well, I'm going to take a join, because it's all these lines, right? And these lines are separate. It's just a tuple, but we're going to put them all together in one thing. So we're going to use the new line, because we don't want them to be stretching out. It's a new line every time. And we have to take those into one big package. So we're going to say two other things we need, which is, does it move like from the left to the right? Is it moving forward? And then does it get cut off from the right to the left? Is it chopped off at the edge? So let's fill in those. I'm going to make one that's called move, which is bumping it forward. Okay, every time the bus has to get blanks in front of it, or behind it, I guess, increasing based on the frame. So lambda, we're going to get the line and the frame, so we're going to return a new line based on how much we're bumping it over. And so we're going to go bus speed times frame times blank. So it's like if we're on the first frame, we haven't moved. We haven't moved. And then the next one we move a little bit, and the next one we move a little more, based on the speed and the frame. And then we do plus line. So whatever the old line was, which is the bus stuff, you go boom, 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 add it up. Okay. And then finally, we have kind of two things that I'm going to combine into one. We've got adding spaces on the other side. So we added spaces of the left, the behind, but you also sometimes add spaces over here, right? And then you also chop it off. So if you get too far, we have to chop it off. And I'm going to do both of those together because it's on the right side and they feel like they're related. And my idea was just to call this size. It's not a very good idea because it's a little bland. Maybe we could call it like right something. It's doing the pad, which is adding, and it's also doing the trim, which is cutting. So maybe we could call it pad/trim or something. But it takes a line and it says, all right, we're going to add a bunch of spaces, way too many, just to make sure we have enough. And then we're going to chop it up. Okay, so I'm going to go line plus space times frame size, which is like way too many spaces unless we have literally nothing in a line. But it's guaranteed to be enough. And then that whole thing is sliced. So we add a bunch and then we chop it. So we go like colon, which means up to frame size. Okay, so now we got these two things, which are enough to set it up on the left, set it up on the right. Bada bing, bada boom. We just got to make sure we call them and do it in the right order. We want to do the moving first, because if we don't know how far along it is, we don't know how much it's going to need to be padded or trimmed on the other end. So the move is like the inside part, and then the size is going to be around it. So we're going to go move of, line and frame, and then size around that whole thing for line in lines. So every frame, we take this stuff, feed it into both of these, put them all together, I set this up in a different way earlier when I did it, and I was able to like test because I was doing one thing at a time. This one I was showing it in a way that's like, oh, I've already figured it out. So it might be a little less clear since I wasn't run showing every intermediate step. But the idea, once you see it, is pretty reasonable, I think. And let's take a moment to compare it to other people, because maybe if my code is not to your liking, then some of the others could be. This one is really cute because he's just got two massive lines that like this calculates everything and this calculates everything else. You're talking about the sizing So he's using like the index to say, okay, we're gonna multiply this little middle section here, and then this is doing all the stuff that I was doing with my padding, trimming, move size stuff. Pretty normal once you know what you're doing. Like, he's doing the same thing I did, so it's kind of readable, but not really at all. It's a mess. I would rather see English words for the steps here, right? This next one looks really nice. The formatting with the curly braces and then you fill in the parts. I love it. It's longer, but that's no problem. Being longer is great. You give things names, you describe what you're doing, you set it up. The only problem with being long is that sometimes a thing from the beginning connects to a thing from the end and they're really far apart. This isn't too bad. I like it. Even though he does the empty list append thing, which I always try to avoid, I like it. This one, absolutely insane, but I'll give him points for the BUS parameters. That's very cute. It's a bus. Get it? This one, pretty cool. He's using ljust, which is, I don't know why I say he, it could be she or any other pronoun in the world. Ljust, which means left justify. Same thing I was doing with the padding and trim stuff, but probably better. Why not use the built-in method for that? And if you, oh, this one's cool. It kind of sort of rotates these in a way to adjust them. These are really fun to see because everybody has their own style, and if you see how they named it, how they set it up, you can get a feel for different ways to do these. I like mine, but it's not revolutionary. It's basically doing the same stuff as these others. It's just about how do we express what we're doing, and hopefully make it so that the lines aren't super long. That's one thing I like. I didn't have a super long line, and everything is relatively well named. I don't know. We'll see what you think.